Good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and call to order the County Planning Commission for June 24th, 2024. If you'll please call the roll.
Yes, Commissioners Borja.
Here.
Conklin.
Here.
Corona Sabagnano. Devlin.
Here.
And Rathel.
Here.
And we do have our quorum.
If you'll please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if you'll please make the announcements for the evening.
Certainly. So the county fosters public engagement during the meeting and encourages public participation, civility, and use of courteous language. The Commission does not condone the use of profanity, vulgar language, gestures, or other inappropriate behavior, including personal attacks or threats directed towards any meeting participant. Seating may be limited and available on a first-come, first-served basis. To make an in-person public comment, please complete and submit a speaker request form to the clerk. Each individual will be invited to the podium to make a comment. Members of the public may feel free to send a written comment, which is distributed to the Commission members and filed in the record. Contact information is optional and should include the meeting date and agenda or off-agenda item number to be sent as follows. Email a comment to boardclerk@saccounty.gov and or mail a comment to 700 H Street, Suite 2450, Sacramento, California, 95814.
And we'll get started with the non-contested portion of the agenda this evening. Please go ahead and call item number 1.
And your item number 1 this evening is PLNP 2021-00133. It's for a development plan review and special development permit located approximately 290 feet south of the intersection of Watt Avenue and Larchmont Drives on the west side of Watt Avenue in the North Highlands Foothill Farms community. And the environmental document is a subsequent mitigated negative declaration.
Good evening, Commissioners. Todd Smith, Planning Director. This item is a non-contested item. Staff is available to give a presentation if you wish. It's your pleasure.
Any requests for a presentation or questions for staff on this item this evening? All right, we have none. Thank you, staff. Look to, is the applicant here this evening for item number 1? You are welcome to come and address the commission if you'd like. Not required to, but you are welcome at this time. We'll go ahead and get you sworn in this evening.
Okay, sir, if you please raise your right hand and the appropriate response is I do. Do you swear that the testimony that you're about to give this board is the truth, so help you God? And if you do not swear, do you so affirm? I do. And if you please state your name for the record and make the statement, I have been sworn.
Benjamin Johansson, I have been sworn.
Thank you. Let me raise this just a little bit for you. Okay.
My name is Ben Johansson. I'm the architect for here, one of the architects who's worked on the project, and the owner is here as well, if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant this evening? All right. Thank you, Mr. Johansson. Do we have any public comments this evening?
And we do not have any public comments.
All right. We'll go ahead and close public comment, and I'll be happy to entertain a motion. Motion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion for staff recommendation and a second. Please call the roll.
Commissioners Borja.
Yes.
Conklin.
Yes.
Devlin. And Rathel.
Yes.
And with those members present, the motion carries.
All right, and that concludes item number 1. We'll now move on to the contested portion of the agenda. Please call item number 2.
And item number 2 this evening is PLNP 2022-00027. It's for a community plan amendment, rezone, tentative subdivision map, use permit, special development permit, and design review. And it is located at 4626 445 and 4450 Manzanita Way and 5900 Winding Way, located on the southeast corner of the Winding Way and Manzanita Avenue intersections in the Carmichael Old Foothill Farms community, and the environmental document is a mitigated negative declaration. Metro, can you please? There we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, I'm Leanne Mueller with Planning and Environmental Review. and this project is PLMP 2022-00027. It is known as the Winding Ranch Development. This project is 18.57 gross acres, and it is located at the southeast corner of Winding Way and Manzanita Avenue in the Carmichael Old Foothill Farms community. This site consists of 3 legal parcels, and it excludes a small commercial center near that southwest corner of the site. The project site is currently zoned SC, which is shopping center, and LC, which is light commercial. And for the purposes of our zoning code, they are very similar. Approximately 15.77 acres is SC and 2.8 acres is LC. The property does vary in topography with flat to gently rolling topography, and there is a drainage that runs north to south on the site, and it does contain grass and native and non-native trees. As I've stated, the zoning of the site is shopping center and light commercial. The surrounding areas do consist of a retail shopping center and an existing service station in a shopping center to the north, a multifamily zoning of RD40 to the south, which is not part of this project. And then there are single-family and multifamily uses to the east. And to the west, there are shopping centers and single-family and multifamily residential. So again, this project is located at the southeast corner of Winding Way and Manzanita Avenue. This site has previously been developed with other uses in the past. For example, there was an automotive service center at that southwesterly corner, which is approximately where the new one is proposed, and that was in the 1960s, and it was subsequently demolished in the 2010-11 timeframe. There is also an existing 1.8 acre parking area on Manzanita Avenue. It's adjacent to that little commercial center, and it's about 1,000 feet south of the intersection. It was previously developed with the Crestview Lanes, and it was developed in the 1960s, and it was subsequently demolished in approximately 2014 and 2018. What's left again is that parking area, the paved area, and a sign. The remainder of this site has largely been undeveloped. We would note that there has been a combination of code violations across the subject properties from 2005 to 2023. These violations were related to transient camps, overgrown vegetation, and the presence of junk and rubbish. We currently do have 2 code violations on the site related to overgrown vegetation. Okay, so the entitlement request that is before the Planning Commission is a community plan amendment, rezone, tentative subdivision map, use permit, special development permit, and a design review to develop those 3 parcels that are approximately 18.57 acres. So what you're looking at is that there will be a 6.7 acre commercial development that is going to consist of 6 buildings totaling approximately slightly over 29,000 square feet that has the frontage along the Manzanita Avenue. And then there's a 79-unit residential subdivision that actually takes its access off a Winding Way. And then you have a detention basin, which is Lot B, which is also associated on that residentially zoned portion. There's 3 landscaped lots and an emergency vehicle access, which is Lot E. So this project did have an environmental document prepared for it. It is an initial study mitigated negative declaration. It was released for public review on May 8th, 2024. And there were no substantive comments that were received on that. The ISM&D concluded that the project would result in a less than significant impact to the environment, but there are mitigation measures associated with certain topic areas to reduce potentially significant impacts to a less than significant impact. And those are associated with lighting, construction emissions, biological resources, cultural resources, and greenhouse gases and noise. So I'm going to get into the project itself a little bit here. So what you're looking at is the tentative parcel map for the entire site. As we've noted, there is a commercial portion and a residential portion. The residential portion is located right here. It consists of 79 lots, and it is going to have a potential of RD10 zoning district, but it will be developed with approximately 8 dwelling units per acre. And I did note in there that I wanted to clarify that there are no private streets, they are all public streets. I made a carry forward error. And then there is going to be the commercial portion, which is located right here. And the gas station, service station, is going to be located on this lot here. It's identified as P1. And then there are additional lots along the frontage, a total of 5 additional lots. This is the landscape plan for the proposed project. What you're going to be looking at is a double row of trees along Manzanita Avenue, which consist of maples and then valley oaks. And then you are going to also see that there are screen trees located along the perimeter of the commercial portion where it will abut the residential portion. And then it does wrap around to that lot 6 where it will continue to abut the proposed residential subdivision. And then one of the other things to note is that there is internal landscaping between the lots, and there is especially landscaping along the rear of those commercial buildings where it does abut the residential subdivision. This is the Circle K. This is the gas station and convenience store that is the only known user for the project at this time. So you're looking at the rendering for this. It consists of the canopy, and then it has 8 dispensers consisting of 16 pump stations, a 5,200 square foot convenience store, and then there is a drive-through car wash associated with that one. So the additional residential lots have gone through a design review, and there have been 4 proposed designs associated with them. So this would provide that if a future developer were to come in for one of those, then and they chose these designs, then it would be approved through the already approved design review. And this should ensure consistency of design amongst the 6 commercial parcels. Okay, so then we get to our advisory recommendations. It did go to the Carmichael Old Foothill Farms in July of 2023. The CPAC did consider this project, and they ultimately voted 4 yes, 0 no to recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve the projects. Their recommendations were that the detention basin be in a commercial zoning district, and then the Board of Supervisors look at the Jan Drive improvements, which are not part of this application at this time. So I did want to note that. The proposed project was also reviewed by our DRAC, which is our Design Review Advisory Committee, in July of 2023. The DRAC did recommend approval of this project to the final hearing body as well. They did find that it would be in substantial compliance. Their only comments were that they were wanting to see replacement of native trees and habitat within the overall project boundary. So when we get to the project, it is a community plan amendment and rezone. It's going to take approximately 8.8 acres of the shopping center designation and then 2.8 acres of that light commercial, and it's going to be a total of 11.5 acres of RD10 zoning, which would allow for that 79 lot residential subdivision. Then you're looking at a tentative parcel map. It's going to divide it into, again, the residential and then the 6 commercial lots. It also provides 3 landscape lots, the drainage lot, And then I would note that where I had put the 2 private streets, they are all public streets now. We're going to get to a use permit, and the use permit does allow for that service station use. It does also allow for the neighborhood convenience store, which is approximately closer than 500 feet from residential uses, to have 24 hours. And then it would allow a drive-through with amplified sound on those 3 drive-through portions within 300 feet of a residential zoning district. And then the other thing to note is that the pump island canopy is slightly taller than what was the base for the district. So it's supposed to be 2.5 feet above. It is 3 feet. There's also a special development permit associated with this project, and it is for car wash standards, landscaping, planters, and screening, the automobile service center signage, and then the masonry wall length. And then it also has to do with the applicant is proposing reduced setbacks for the residential portion and a reduced driveway length. So what you're looking at for this is, again, as we've gone over, Lot 81 is going to be developed with the Circle K automobile service station. It is going to have the 8 dispensers with the 16 pump stations. It is going to have a car wash and then a convenience store. The store and the service station is proposed to operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which does necessitate that use permit. And then the car wash is going to operate between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. There are additional lots that are going to have drive-throughs, and these do not have an identified end user at this time. And then the 2 other lots are going to have retail and restaurant, and they also have no end user at this time. The other part of this is a 79-lot single-family residential subdivision with a density of approximately 8 units per acre. It is going to be sold to a home builder and developed. The applicant for this is not the developer for that portion of the project. So we do have condition of approval number 20, which requires a subsequent design review of the homes and the project's landscaping for compliance with the design guidelines. Their typical lot size is going to be approximately 45 by 80 or 3,600 square feet, which is consistent with the RD10 zoning code. And then there's going to be a street connection to the existing Rampart Drive, as well as a street connection to Winding Way. So brings us to another item, fencing. There is going to be a masonry wall which will separate the commercial portion from the residential portion. It is going to be 7 feet tall adjacent to that Circle K, and then it drops to 6 feet along the rest of the perimeter. There is 1 break in that wall which would allow pedestrian access through that residential subdivision. It is between lots 34 and 35, and adjacent to lot P3, and that will be landscaped. The site access to the commercial development is going to be provided by a total of 5 driveways, so not every individual lot is going to have its own driveway, which is leading us to the conditions for cross-access easement. The service station and convenience store will have driveways on Manzanita and Winding, but the other ones will have access to Manzanita. And then we would note that, again, as I've said, a second street connection is being provided to the existing neighborhood at Rampart Drive and Street 5 for that residential subdivision. This project does have a 1-acre drainage basin, which is Lot B. The county is going to ultimately accept ownership of that basin, and then it's going to require the joining of a stormwater utility fee program in the future by the developer. So that concludes staff's presentation, and Planning and Environmental Review staff does recommend that the Planning Commission determine that the environmental analysis is adequate and complete, that you recommend that the Board of Supervisors adopt the mitigated monitoring and reporting program, that they adopt the resolution to amend the Carmichael Old Foothill Farms community plan, that they approve the rezone ordinance, that they approve the tentative subdivision map subject to the findings and conditions of approval in attachment 2, that they approve the various conditional use permit items for the development, and that they approve the special development permit subject to the findings and conditions, and then that they find the project in substantial compliance with the design guidelines. And I can answer any questions for you, and the project applicant team is also here tonight.
You want to kick us off this evening?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation, a wonderful analysis. Had a couple of questions. I learned my lesson a couple hearings ago to double click on historical code violations. So just for clarification purposes and for my own edification, were the 28 code violations from previous owners or existing owners? And then also the 2 open and active violations, where are we at in the status of those?
So since they're from 2005 to the current, it's a combination of previous owners and then current owners. Obviously, the historical ones have been taken care of as the only, like the transient camps, junk and rubbish, those are no longer active, but the 2 that are for the vegetation. And I don't know exactly where they are in the process, but my thought would be that they would be taken care of through the development of the site.
Okay, thank you. And kind of pivoting now and kind of focusing on the issues that have been surfaced related to noise pollution. As I understand it, we have, for the 6 commercial lots, we'll have drive-throughs with some sort of amplified sound devices that will be proposed within 300 feet of residential zones. Do we have, and we don't know who the end users are here, no prospective tenants, but I'm concerned that, and I think CPAC had even highlighted some concerns related to that. What are we doing to mitigate that? And if at all?
So I'm looking through the mitigation measures, because I thought we had an actual mitigation measure as a related to noise. So we do have a mitigation measure as it results to the car wash noise. So that's going to be making sure that for the car wash itself, that the blowers have a certain noise level. And then the other thing is that we would anticipate that by having that 6-foot masonry wall, that would provide additional noise attenuation.
But the 6-foot wall, just so I understand, can visualize this, that's for the tunnels that are, the drying tunnel, the drying aspects of the tunnel that are proposed to be 3 feet instead of 10 feet. That would mitigate that, but, or those noise pollutions that might be born out of that. Is there masonry walls being proposed for or in or around the drive-throughs?
So there is a masonry wall that is being proposed along that.
Just the backside.
Yes, along that backside, and let me see if I can. So all along here,
Yeah.
and then wrapping around to here, there is a 6-foot tall masonry wall that is proposed.
And then so the distance between those drive-throughs to the next residential area is going to be 300 feet or less?
It's less than 300 feet,
Less than
because our
300 feet.
standard is that if you are less than 300 feet, you
Yeah.
need the permit.
Okay. And how much less than 300 feet are we?
Let me see if I can find the measurement there.
I mean, it was 299, that's fine. I'm just trying to get a better understanding of.
It's more than, to your point, it is definitely less than 200 because 300, my apologies, because what you're looking at is you can see most basically on the landscape plan here that the drive-throughs wrap around here.
Yeah.
And then there's one that wraps around back there.
Yep.
And then obviously one there. So there is the wall and then the landscaping, but I would say that you're probably looking at 50 to 75 feet based on just the design of that.
Got it.
And we can, I think the applicant team is here and they can provide further details on that.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. That's helpful. And as I understand it, the applicant has indicated that light standards won't exceed 18 feet. Okay.
Correct.
Can you speak to any green space? Is there any green space around the project or incorporated in the project?
So, and I don't know if you're talking about like public green space or if you're just talking about landscaping green space.
Public.
There is not necessarily public green space. I mean, I think that the idea is that there would be the pedestrian access
Okay.
to the residential subdivision, which does have some landscaping, but actual like a dedicated park or something to that effect, there is not.
And, okay, and then with the detention basin being maintained by the county, is that correct?
Ultimately, it will be, yes.
And it's not going to be in a commercial space?
No.
Okay. And then the Jan Drive connection, that is the same as the pedestrian connection between the commercial and the residential components, or is that different?
It is not.
It is not, okay.
So, and where's the... So, unfortunately, these are all a little bit small for those of us with eyesight issues. But there is behind, I believe it's lot P3, and then in between lots 34 and 35, there is a pedestrian access that goes from the commercial portion into the residential subdivision.
Okay. And as I understand it, CPAC had concerns of the detention basin being zoned with the zoning and with the, specifically because of the Carmichael Improvement District would be able to assist with patrolling and enforcement. I was wondering if maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
So I think that ultimately the CPAC was wanting that the drainage basin have the commercial zoning rather than the residential zoning.
Okay.
But at this point, it's going to be entirely fenced and the county will be
Okay.
accepting it.
I'm just trying to get that all aired out because I know there are undoubtedly folks listening, and I just wanted to make sure that that was brought to their attention. Okay. And then for the pedestrian connection, I know that they're not looking to have, or there was I think concerns or at least a desire to have those come back through a discretionary approval process once a tenant's been identified, but that's not what's being proposed. Is that correct?
That's correct. At this point, the residential portion would go through a subsequent design review for the design of those houses and then the landscaping, but we're not anticipating going back through a review of the commercial unless for some reason somebody like substantially deviates from what is approved.
Okay. That helps me better visualize this. Okay, thank you very much. That's all I had.
Other questions for staff this evening? Commissioner Borja?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate the the thorough presentation. In the staff review, it was noted that the general plan identified this parcel as a potential transit-oriented development. We kind of slightly deviate from that on a more car-centric use. So that's my first question. And then second question, I'm trying to find my notes here, but there was a comment about the applicant or maybe the design team did not want to participate in the corridor plan, or is there a corridor plan designated in this area? Only want to say because, about 5 or 6 miles away from this hearing body a few months ago, decided not to move forward a car-centric approach. I think it was a Popeyes, because the corridor plan specifically spoke not to have more car uses. And so I'm just trying to find consistency on how certain projects can deviate, some projects cannot deviate. So yeah, thank you.
To answer your question about the corridor plan, yes, there is one. It was recently modified to allow for drive-throughs, and it is optional for this area, and the applicant chose not to participate. So that's your answer there.
Commissioner Borja, a little bit more detail on that. The Main Street district of the Fair Oaks Boulevard corridor plan is further south. That has very prescriptive requirements and prohibitions to that point that call for, prior to its recent amendment, they prohibited drive-through uses entirely. Now they allow, that SPA allows for those uses to be proposed with a use permit to be approved by the board. This property is further north along that corridor, and it doesn't have the same prescriptive measures as the Main Street district. The language in there does say it's optional. Some things are encouraged, strongly encouraged, et cetera, but not required.
Awesome, thank you. And then, sorry to cut you off. And so the transit-oriented development, is that also more of a prescriptive and not required?
It is a little bit more prescriptive, and then it talks about near transit opportunities and pedestrian-friendly design is desired. And so I think that given the fact that we do have the street connection through to the existing residential subdivision to the more easterly, and then there was a pedestrian connection into this particular commercial subdivision, and then the fact that there will be expansion of the sidewalks, and then there are walking paths through the commercial portion, I think you could argue that it is pedestrian friendly.
Okay, thank you. And then you mentioned that the Jan Drive improvements would not be included in this presentation, but Jan Drive kind of winds. I tried to drive it, and I ended up going to the card store just a little bit north.
Right.
Does that? I mean, is the applicant responsible for that entire drive, or just their section of the project?
So the applicant at this point is responsible for the portion that we are looking at, which is the 3 lots. It does not currently include that more southerly portion that has the RD40. Now, if at such time somebody came in for a development proposal on that RD40, then I think we would be very much looking at that connection and seeing what would be conditioned, if it would be conditioned to go through, because as you're well aware, it is in our plans, the community plan and our other transportation plans to connect, but there has been neighborhood opposition. But as of right now, the applicant is not responsible for that.
Okay, thank you. And just one last question. We've looked at other gas stations in the past. I know specifically in the South Sacramento community, we ended up asking for a little bit more like sustainable designs, like solar, EVs. Is that, or might have just missed any of those design elements on the actual gas station, or are they at all included?
My understanding is that there's not a solar component, and as is required by our BMPs, they will be EV charger ready. So
by whatever the Cal Green Code, by the time they go for construction?
Correct. But they're not, that I'm aware and that I've noticed, doing anything beyond that.
Okay, thank you. That's it for now. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Devlin?
Yes, thank you. So I've got maybe kind of a series of kind of why questions. The front and rear setbacks on the residential portion are to be reduced to 12.5 foot in the front and 10 in the rear. And that is a 10-foot backyard.
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to presume that was to achieve density.
It is to get a higher density, and then my guess is it a little bit give flexibility for the end product.
For the end product?
For the end product, the residences that would go on the property.
The deviation from the signage limitation from 125 square feet to basically doubling that to 245. Why?
So basically, our zoning code requires that signage associated with service stations be 125 square feet. We find that service stations routinely come in and ask to exceed that by various quantities. Usually it has to do with signage on the canopy. Usually there'll be some signage on the canopy. Usually there'll be some signage on the pump itself. And then sometimes they'll have, I think in this case, they're having a couple monument signs as well. So that's generally why.
Maybe the applicant, when they come up, can speak to that. The length of the masonry wall without a break, that seems to be another substantive deviation. Requiring a break of every 300 feet. This one is just over 1,100 feet.
Correct.
Why?
That is what the applicant has proposed for this project.
And that's the wall, presumably running along the top green line?
Correct.
Like that?
So what you're looking at, the masonry wall is running along here and then wraps around there. And there is the one break behind the one commercial lot where it connects into the residential subdivision.
Okay. All right, I'll save maybe the last of my questions. And just while you got your laser pointed out there, can you just point to the car wash really quickly, just so this is impossible for me to see.
The car wash is located right here.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right. On the masonry wall, just so I understand what the code indicates, it's 1,137 feet. So typically you'd have 3 breaks per code?
Roughly, yes.
Okay. And then the special development permit, specifically on the residential side, and I see condition 20 there, but the design review is at the staff level, or is that back to the planning commission level?
It would be at staff level.
At staff level, okay. So typically when we see these requests for a special development permit, we also see some floor plans, and we also see, hey, 80% of the floor plans are going to comply with this, but in this specific case, 4% or whatever are going to deviate. And so we're asking for this exception, but 96% of the lots are going to be compliant. But in this case, since it's not coming back for design review, we would be granting 100% of the lots to have all of these special development permit.
Correct. So what you're seeing is that, you're correct, you're not seeing the level of detail that sometimes you would normally see associated with the project. But yes, they're asking for the 10-foot rear, 12.5-foot front, and I believe 3 on the sides.
But we haven't seen any justification with why this is from a floor plan standpoint.
I think their justification is generally that they're going to sell it to a subsequent developer, and so they wanted that flexibility.
So just to maximize the buildable square footage.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
or to give the maximum flexibility for the design.
Okay. That's the way I'm looking at it too. So we'll let them address that when they come up. I just wanted to understand it and make sure I was understand it correctly at the staff level. As far as the speakers, I look at the drive-through. I'm thinking, this is a great slide to be on. I can orient my drive-through a variety of different ways. And I can also set up my drive-through, with different technology and different speaker arrangements. Is any of that outlined, since we don't know what the tenants are, is any of that outlined if we're 50 feet, say for example, I think it's P2, that's the one next to the, P2 is next to the car wash there?
Correct.
So in P2, if I understand the orientation correctly, I would be driving all the way against the masonry wall, and then I'd be basically 50 feet from there, and presumptively I would have that speaker of the drive-through up there, 50 feet from a residence, and same with P3, P5.
I think potentially you could have that orientation, yes.
Okay, so two of them, we would have the speakers kind of oriented by the neighbors, and then it looks like P3, we would have it kind of oriented toward the road. Is that the way I'm seeing this?
Are you referring to like this one here?
I think that's P5, right? So that's
Yes.
basically that's saying the speaker's oriented toward the neighbors, right?
For this one here?
Well, I'll ask the applicant. It's probably
Yeah,
a
I
better
would- I
of
would
an applicant
clarify
question.
that with
Is
the
it?
applicant.
We don't have any. We don't have any mitigation measures, and I think this was already answered, and it's in there. We don't have any mitigation measures associated with the drive-through speakers or the orientation of those buildings and the drive-through. It's got to be those two lanes are going into one lane, so the two lanes are where they queue up, right?
Yeah, we do not have any mitigation measures related to specifically the drive-throughs and the speaker box locations, no.
Perfect. That concludes my staff questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to public comment.
No public comments.
All right, we're going to go ahead and conclude public comment, and we will take, well, I guess I missed the applicant presentation. We'll wait, and we'll have the applicant presentation first. I got out of order, I apologize. If you have multiple team members tonight, we can get you all sworn in at once. If you're a team member that may be answering a question, if you could also stand and raise your right hand, and I'll let the clerk take it from here.
And the appropriate response is I do. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give this commission is the truth, so help you God? And if you do not swear, do so affirm?
I do.
And when you come to the podium, if you could please state your names for the record and make the statement, I have been sworn.
Tiffany Wilson, and I have been sworn.
Thank you.
Right. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Tiffany Wilson with RSC Engineering, applicant on this project. We do have our whole team with us, our architect for the commercial pads. I'm not sure if the Circle K rep made it or not. They were hoping to make it, and then the owner and the owner's rep as well as the preliminary design planner and engineer for the residential lots. We're the engineer for the commercial, so it's a whole team to make this project work. I want to thank staff for working with us over the year, and as well as for the thorough presentation. We're finally before you with a project that we think works for this area, where we have some commercial along the busy Manzanita Avenue, and then the 79 small detached single-family lots closer to the existing apartments and other residential to the east. So we submitted, back in 2022, and have had a lot of back and forth with staff, and have made some changes throughout our process after going through, CPAC and then the Design Review Advisory Council. And we are in agreement with all the draft conditions and mitigation measures that are before you tonight. I can answer, some of the questions that I was writing down as you guys were speaking in hopes, and then whatever we've missed, we will answer as we go along. So I know on the, just first, the noise, there was a noise study done as part of the mitigated neg deck by Ballard Acoustical. They had this site plan, which you are correct, so the pad P2 and P5, those menu boards are about 50 feet away from the wall, so the property line. So then they'd be about 60 feet probably from the back of the homes when they're developed. But the noise study did analyze that location, and through their modeling, the 6-foot wall was supposed to keep the noise levels below the general plan noise requirements. So that's why you don't see any further mitigations, such as additional walls or taller walls. Same with the car wash air. They're pointing towards Manzanita, or the dryers, I'm sorry. They're pointing towards Manzanita, so basically the car wash itself is blocking a lot of the sound. And again, the noise study analyzed that and did not say there was unnecessary additional mitigation measures for that noise. And then P3 is much further away, as you have said, so they will be entering south of the building, and that's where that menu board is. So it's probably closer to 150 or 175 feet away. On the wall connection issue, we do have one. It's pretty much in the middle of the site. The reason we don't have one at the first 300 feet is it would be in the detention basin. And the basin is a deep basin that's serving for drainage and stormwater quality. It's not something people want to be in, so it will be fenced off for safety reasons. So no connection there. And then if we had another connection further south, that's where we've got these 3 to 5 foot grade differences. So there's some retaining wall and some slope that will be occurring in that location, which would make it pretty difficult to put a connection without a lot of walls in between two of the lots to get it through. So that is why we are proposing one. We've also heard feedback from some of the neighbors at the seed pack that they really didn't want any connection. So we're trying to compromise here with one to appease staff, but not too many per what the neighbors have discussed with us at CPAC. The basin, yes, so CPAC was asking it to be part of the commercial. Really, commercial CCNRs aren't meant to maintain basins, and then also the homeowners association doesn't want to maintain it. So subsequent to the CPAC, we've been working hard with Department of Water Resources and have come up with the agreement that they would maintain it. And so then we just left it in the residential zone. There was no reason to change the zoning to put it in the commercial. I think early on there was some discussion about replacing oak trees, so we will be taking a number of oak trees out where there is the open ditch. We will be replacing some oak trees within the commercial area. I'm sure there will be street trees in the residential when it comes forward, but there's no design for that now. And then there's obviously a number of other type of trees that provide a lot more color, and parking lot shade trees that are proposed, as you can see on the landscape plan. And on the transit-oriented Fair Oaks corridor plan, Leanne was correct how we chose not to participate. We feel that we've, provided a design that is kind of like a mixed use, where we're not all 100% commercial, we're not all 100% residential, so we're providing a little bit of both. And while some of the uses are auto-oriented, there are, at one time, we were proposing all drive-throughs. So we did compromise on providing two of the buildings that are more of a shop building, which could have your nail salon or your dry cleaners or other types of uses that would be walkable to the neighbors. We're also bringing residential to this area that has a lot of retail already, and so those new residents could be walking to the shopping center to the north if they choose, or even if you had some type of drive-through user, but you still still can walk there if it's a desirable use. And so that's where we feel that this design and project that we're proposing is providing desired uses for this area in the county and will fit in with the community. Let's see, so you're correct. So no, Pappas Investments, the property owner, is not a home builder. So the intent is to sell those residential lots to a potential home builder, and then they have their, plot plan that they will fit within those setbacks to create the appropriate homes. We did try to increase the density, feeling that kind of middle small lot housing is what is needed in this area, and it could provide homes for potential people in more of a middle income class. So we've, in order to get that density and where we feel that the right size home will fit there, that is the reason for some of those setback reductions. And we know that some home builders, we've seen those type of homes built on those size lots. So we wouldn't have designed a lot with unreasonable setbacks if we did not have experience knowing some of these home builders. That's what they do, is design these homes that fit in these smaller lots. So it's definitely a specific home builder that will come and build these smaller detached single family lots. Yep, and I think the last one was, you're correct, we're not developing the multifamily lot to the south, so nothing with Jan Drive, since what we're proposing is not contiguous to it. That would happen if at such time that development comes forward. So I'm hoping I caught everything, and again, we have our whole team here to answer more specific questions if you have them.
Questions for the applicant team this evening? Commissioner Bora, any questions?
Yes. Can you just talk about whether or not y'all were able to incorporate any of the carbon neutral or carbon reducing or sustainability, like greenhouse? I know the project will not have like a significantly net increase in GHG emissions, but like I mentioned before, a lot of the gas stations that we've seen in the past have added a little bit more of the greener flavor to their design.
I think Leanne's right. My understanding is Circle K will meet the current Cal Green code with the EV chargers. We will have bike racks, bike lockers. Per the climate action plan through the county, everything will be electric unless they provide offsets. So should a restaurant come forward, they would have to do a lot more to then provide gas in their cooking establishment. I have not heard that Circle K, they did not specify anything specifically, so I'm not aware.
Understood. And I'm not too sure, are we also approving the Circle K to be able to sell alcohol on this, or am I outside of the scope on this one?
That's outside of the scope for this one. That will go to the board.
Okay, understood. Okay, so that. And then as far as, thank you again for answering our questions. For the convenience store, might there be any, will they also be selling like fresh fruit or anything like that?
My understanding is they do sell fresh fruit. I would have to refer how much they typically, but I think a lot of these convenience stores are trying to cater a little more fresh food lately. And that did bring me up. I forgot about signage. So I know you guys were concerned about the additional signage. So sorry, before I forget. Reason they're asking for more is the state requires pricing signs to be visible from both streets. So there's 2 freestanding pricing signs. So that in itself doubled the freestanding sign. And then by virtue of having the convenience store, the gas station canopy, and the car wash, the county just gives you the 125. They've added extra elements that need additional signage. So that's why they're proposing more than what the county require or allows.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Devlin, any questions for the applicant?
Can you point to the location of the 2 free-standing signs and explain a little bit more about the state law requirement and that interaction?
I'm not sure how to. Do I just press? Oh, that one, sorry. Wrong button. So the one pricing sign for Winding Way is like right there, sorry. And then the one on Manzanita is down here. And so the state weight and measures has a requirement of how high the new numbers need to be for the pricing, and then you obviously have your I'm going to say good gas, the different levels of your gas and your diesel. So there's usually 4 bars of the pricing sign, and then you would typically have a Circle K. And I think in your, I was confident in your packet, they, I'll find it here. We've tried to make sure the pricing sign is consistent with the other freestanding signs for the pad. So there is an element of the brick veneer on the bottom. We kind of have a wood element on the side, so that increases the size. And then you can see embedded in the middle of the structure is where you have the Circle K logo, the diesel, unleaded plus, and the premium. And so now we've had 2 because we need 1 on each street. The reason we didn't have, so you could sometimes have 1 on the corner, but that's a kind of an embellished pedestrian area where the crosswalk is. So we didn't feel putting the pricing sign there was appropriate.
Thank you.
As a follow-up, staff would note that we do have condition of approval 11. In the conditions that require a minimum of 15% of shelf space be reserved for healthy foods. To answer your question about what would be sold in the store.
Thank you.
I'll hop in now. Can you talk about what square footage each of the houses is expected to be?
I can't. I don't know if there's.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thad Johnson of Pappas Investments. I have been sworn in. Our partner on the home building partner on the project is D.R. Horton, and they're here this evening. Looks like the product they'll be putting on the project site is about 1,550 square feet to 1,650 square feet.
And can you talk a little bit about why we would need to have 4 of the design standards waived? Can you justify each of those for me?
I probably could, but they could probably do it a lot better than I can. So I'm going to invite our planner, Stan Meddy of Wood Rogers on the residential end, to come up. And if you'd like to hear from Bonnie Chu, who's with D.R. Horton, she's here as well.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. Stan Meddy with Wood Rogers. I have been sworn. If I can talk a little bit about the design approach. Again, we're trying to be smart and efficient with land use. We're trying to provide a home site for the middle income buyer, and that means that it's a smaller home on a smaller lot with smaller setbacks. And going into this, we didn't have a home builder partner at the beginning of the process. Now we do as we're concluding, but we wanted to provide, as Tiffany said, a lot of flexibility. Some of these homes might utilize those setbacks, some of these might not. Ultimately, we're trying to provide, as we said, flexibility. The sidewalks, the attached sidewalks, are again utilization of land. We're trying to compress the site, make sure that everything works efficiently. So that's really the genesis of our design approach. I hope that answers your question, but I'd be willing to entertain a follow-up if there is one.
And do you know about how many sites would be using each of these exceptions that are being requested?
The deviations apply to the entire site, but until we get into specific home plans, I cannot answer that question today. But for example, the deviations with respect to the setbacks and the sidewalks, those apply to site-wide to the residential area.
So how many plans are planned for this neighborhood?
I will defer to the home builder on that, but I suspect there's 2 to 3.
Good evening, Commissioners, and I have not been sworn in.
We'll get you sworn in.
Great.
Raise your right hand, and the appropriate response is I do. And do you swear that the testimony you're about to give this commission is the truth, so help you God? If you do not swear, do you so affirm?
I do.
And if you could state your name for the record and make this statement, I have been sworn.
Bonnie Chu, I have been sworn.
Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners and everyone tonight. My name is Bonnie Chu, Vice President of Forward Planning for D.R. Horton in the Sacramento Division. Happy to be the development partners with Pappas on this exciting project. We have 3 house plans planned for this project. They range from, again, 1,567 square feet to 1,631 square feet. They're all 2-story homes and range from 3 and 4 bedroom homes to with 2.5 baths. To answer your question, it would be the vast majority of the lots, if they're typically 45 by 75 in dimension, would take advantage of the setbacks that are requested, the reduced setbacks that are requested. The house plans are generally, let's get my notes out here, are generally 25 by 45 feet. So if the majority of the concern or question is to do with the lot depth and the setbacks related to the front and rear setbacks, with the 75 deep lot in a house that's 45 in depth and an 18-foot driveway, that leaves about 12 feet. So that's just a little bit of cushion to deal with utilities and things of that nature. So hopefully that answers your question.
That answers the depth question. Can you talk a little bit about the width question? I really don't like 3 foot. I don't see how you can safely get somebody out of a second-story window on the home like that. Even the state's only pushed us to 4 feet with ADU law, so I don't like that exception in particular, so that's the one I'm mainly concerned about.
So generally, our houses are about 25 feet wide, and so you can expect that the majority of these lots will enjoy 5-foot side yards on each side. The reduced setback will give us flexibility if for not really corner lots conditions, but for situations related to drainage and other retaining walls that are needed and things of that nature to make sure that there's usable side yards. So that'll just give us some wiggle room to work with these small lots and these small footprint homes.
So would you say 10% would use that interior yard setback? I'm sorry to get into real specifics here. Normally we have a set of plans and we have a very clear...
No problem, and we will be processing, as you know, site and plan design review with staff at a later time. But I would say that the majority of homes we'd be able to accommodate 5 feet on each side.
The majority. Would you be willing to go on record and say a percentage of those you're comfortable at this point saying would have that?
So we haven't done the site-specific and detailed planning, but maybe about half of the homes would need to maybe take advantage of the reduced side yards.
On one side or both sides?
On one side, probably.
On one side.
Yeah.
So it'd just
again,
be like,
depending on sort of the layout when we get to the detailed planning stage.
Got it. So there's no plan to build this entire neighborhood out with 6 feet between the homes?
Not with our current proposed program, no.
Perfect. Let me look through these other ones before you walk off real quick. I've got the front yard setback and the depth I'm pretty comfortable with. The driveway is a minimal, so yep, I'm good.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Ms. Chu. We may have some other questions here for you, Commissioner Conklin.
Chair, I apologize going out of order. I just wanted to try to go back to the masonry wall in the back of the property. I see that we've got this compromise that has ensued to, and I believe there's some objections initially to have any thoroughfare through there, pedestrian thoroughfare. From the earlier iterations that had multiple entry points. So can you kind of describe that process and what the singular entry point does to resolve some of their concerns and achieve the goals of having that entry point there?
Sure. So when we were at the CPAC, a lot of the neighbors were concerned that may be a location where people could come through that they wouldn't desire to be, in the evening or nighttime. That could cause trouble, I guess. So having less of these connections and having one more centralized was the compromise that we came up with. We also tried on the commercial side. We've opened it up. There are some benches and like a pergola to try to make it more inviting. So definitely during the daytime, that would be something that people could utilize. But again, with it only being a small connection, we'd have to rely on people's eyes to make sure nothing is going wrong in that area at night.
So the main concerns primarily from having unwanted populations that have no really business in the residential, from flooding in from the commercial space over to the residential side. Any issues with the noise kind of percolating through those that kind of perforated area there? Or?
No.
No. Okay. And so there's going to be or at least proposed some sort of pergola or gazebo or some sort of area to congregate with shade just at that choke point?
Correct.
Okay. All right. That's all I needed. Thank you, Chair.
Questions for the applicant team?
With the 24-hour operation of the service station, gas station, is there any proposed security elements?
I know they do have a pretty robust security plan. They do have surveillance both in and out. I know through their proposed alcohol license, there would be conditions from the sheriff if it gets approved for, so even though the convenience store is open 24 hours, they can't sell alcohol after a certain time. So there are definitely limitations there. The sheriff has placed a number of conditions on the alcohol sales, and then I believe there are even some on this project as well.
Does staff have any specific security requirements related to
Yes.
this?
So generally for all convenience store, gas station type uses, we do place standard conditions on them. So you'll see at this point that we have condition of approval 9, which talks about policies related to loitering, bicycle racks, signs regarding alcoholic consumption. And then we do have Condition 10, which talks about like the lighting that has to be maintained, that the lighting fixtures have to be vandal resistant. And then we do have conditions regarding cameras. So those are conditions 9 and 10. And then we do obviously have 12, which relates to what we call kind of our SEPTED, which talks about the recycling centers are prohibited, the garbage enclosures have to remain closed, Wi-Fi hours it has to turn off, that type of thing. And then we do obviously have condition 13 as it relates to the car wash, the car wash facilities, about signs regarding like noise from radios, stereos, that type of information. So those are basically conditions 9 through 13.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant team? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And now we'll move on to public comment.
And there are no public comments.
All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment, and we'll move on to deliberation. Would you like to kick us off this evening?
Sure. Yeah. I do agree that this proposal doesn't conflict with any applicable general plan or community plan policies. I see this as a project that represents a tremendous amount of economic development and for the area and job creation. I think the housing portion is tremendous benefits, obviously, to our region and close to transit and so for those reasons, I'm very supportive. I do see and recognize some concerns from prospective residents for security, of having ne'er-do-wells not that are not have any business or that should not be in the residential area, kind of that congregate or a magnet to some of these sticky locations of I would say evening business activities around some of the retail or commerce there that could spill over. And so I wish there was a little bit more security precautions or measures to kind of address some of the concerns that have been raised by the would-be, or at least to address that choke point, because I do feel like that is an unwelcomed element that would be creating an adverse situation for the residents on the other side of the wall. And that is I think my one of my big concerns with this design. I don't want to be overly prescriptive here. I think the design is thoughtful. I do see the drive-throughs configured in a very innovative and creative way to provide greater flexibility for the overall project with the housing elements to it as well. But to earlier points, I wish we had kind of those auditory directional aspects of those service queues or kiosks pointed towards the street and not towards the wall where it would undoubtedly spill over, and I could see irritating and disrupting kind of tranquility on the other side in the residential area. So I wish there was, I think for those two design elements, some adjustments or tweaks that would, I think, make this project a much better project, but I'll leave it at that.
I'll hop in because I kind of land on the other side with the pedestrian walkthroughs. I think we need to get people out of their cars, and providing residential to commercial connections is a great way to do that. If you don't have that connection here, I just think it's super easy for everybody that lives to the east of that to then go ahead and add traffic out on already busy streets. Whereas if we do provide that pedestrian access, I get the CPAC's concern, and if you concentrate folks using one path and make it a busier place, then I do think it probably mitigates some of that issue, right? Whereas if you have three paths, then maybe they don't get used as much, and that's really the way to combat, maybe congregating or some elements that we don't want using those paths from using those paths. If it's busy and it's active, then I think it does address that. And so I land on the other side. I'd rather see two or three, but with one, I can get on board with that compromise. And I think the applicant is orienting that commercial building to where we can see the path. And you do have that drive-through access that is there, so it is going to be a relatively trafficked area that's looking at it, versus it just being in the back of some parking lot or at some loading zone. Like I'm thinking of behind a Safeway or a Rayleigh's, having some pathway that's behind there where very few people are there. I see that as a pretty active portion of the development. I think my primary concern with the design is giving carte blanche on the residential development standards. In particular, the interior setback. I think with D.R. Horton on board and the testimony we heard this evening, I may be able to get there. Maybe with some. I guess I can ask staff. Could we condition that interior yard setback to be 20% or 50% of properties for the design review?
Yes.
Perfect. So I think that would be something that I would be looking here, just considering we don't have any other data that's available.
Yeah, just to add, sir, I would be supportive of that. Only because I'm looking at the the grading plan, and even if we were to do 50%, that still leaves you a certain amount of units, and like you said, just an added extra layer of I don't want to say accountability, but just maybe meeting in the middle, and it's not going to be a carte blanche approach to the. I believe you're talking about the interior 3-foot, right? Because by the time you add like fencing and utility upgrades and anything that can potentially go, you're really eating up and encroaching to that space between the neighbors.
Commissioner Devlin, any further thoughts?
Thank you. I think I kind of maybe landed between you two. I do share your concerns, Mr. Chair, with the kind of carte blanche on particularly those side yard setbacks, and so I'd be supportive of that. As it relates to the connection, I think that there is value in providing that connectivity to the adjacent residential homes. However, I also do think that it also represents a potential issue. And, I wonder, can we condition, or maybe, is this maybe more appropriate for the sheriff's department to take a hard look at? Maybe it's a recommendation to them, because we are going to have 80 adjacent neighbors. Is there, can we condition kind of a collective security requirement, during certain hours, 10 p.m. to...
You can't condition the sheriff to do anything, but you can require, if there's going to be an HOA, you could require their CCNRs to have some kind of provision for security, or you could just recommend to the board that the walkway be eliminated.
Well, I was thinking more of the commercial side of that being responsible, since they would be essentially generating...
You're talking about security for the businesses.
Yeah. Well, and for, and ensuring that access is not a nuisance.
Okay, well, that goes with the use permit then, not so much the map.
Okay.
Would video surveillance address that, a required element of video surveillance?
Potentially, I guess, if it's monitored.
Yeah, and to me, this isn't just about those 79 homes of people that don't live here already. This neighborhood further connects to the east, so you're getting people off of Winding Way, hopefully, that would walk over through the neighborhood in order to go out to dinner. Hopefully. I know I do in my neighborhood. If I hate walking out to the sidewalk, and then around, and then back into the commercial center that I live right next to. And so I'm a big proponent that we connect these things to neighborhoods.
I support the connectivity. I think overall, I guess my kind of broader concerns are just ensuring that it doesn't remain a nuisance. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, just looking at this, I'm not sure really kind of the walkability or desire to walk towards this right now. I mean, I'm looking at a gas station and 3 fast food restaurants with drive-throughs, and maybe what's hopefully like a Chipotle that doesn't have a drive-through, and maybe something else. But that's McDonald's, a Starbucks, and a Jack in the Box. And I'm just not sure like how many people are like, hey, let's walk over to Jack in the Box and get something to eat. Nobody does that. That's why they're always empty when you go inside fast food restaurants, because everybody's in the drive-thru. So maybe they're walking through to get to the proverbial Chipotle or Starbucks that also does have a drive-thru, but I see this as the connectivity is at least having potential, maybe more of a greater downside. And so if there's something that we can do to ensure that there is, that it's monitored in some way.
So a bit of a maybe a bit of a challenge there is if I'm seeing where the walkway is, it looks like it goes straight into that, is it P3? That middle commercial parcel. The use permits for the convenience store and the gas station at the corner. So I'm trying to figure out where a condition, if you were going to work on a condition that required security on the commercial side of the wall. I'm not quite seeing where a condition could be attached to that middle lot, because that's just going to be a lot that's going to be subject to the development standards in the zoning code, but it doesn't necessarily require a use permit for that use, I don't think, right? So it could be tricky to include a condition on that lot. And that's what you'd need. If I understand what you're thinking about there, having that particular business have an additional requirement for security for the comings and goings of that walkway.
Commissioners, and maybe I can ask a little more clarification to Bill's point. Is the concern specifically about the overall security of the commercial component of the project, not necessarily limited to that, the P3 lot? What I'm trying to figure out is, can we craft a condition, as kind of Bill was articulating, that speaks at the intent of making sure that the connection is safe for its users, whether it's through lighting or cameras or I know in some places of obviously a different scenario, but they have call boxes. I'm not suggesting that may be appropriate here because everybody's got a cell phone these days, but is that what you're trying to get at as it relates to that particular connection point?
May I add something? Sir, I think we've looked at other commercial plans before that have security plans, round the clock security, and I think I would be amenable to perhaps including, if it's allowable, for that security plan to also look at monitoring that walkway through that may extend out of the actual commercial area. I think it's not. I think the big elephant in the room has been populations that have stayed in this empty parcel and spots. And while I'm not a big proponent of just providing security and armed forces there, perhaps it might be better if somebody comes in there and if somebody actually needs help, that person will be there, right? Like we're not unhoused encampments. It's just if somebody's there, maybe something extra from just the well-lit, because otherwise it would be the responsibility of those two neighbors that are kind of adjacent to that parkway to essentially put a camera and see if somebody's, again, it's a little bit of a blind spot, so to speak. It's definitely not against loitering or littering, but maybe a middle of both. And forgive me, Commissioner Devlin, if I'm misspeaking, please feel free to add.
No, that was great. Thank you. A related question for staff. Are these, and maybe for the applicant, are all the commercial lots to be subdivided and sold?
I would definitely like the applicant to weigh in on that, and maybe they can also provide some insight as to your questions about the security of the overall site.
First of all, Pappas Investments builds, manages, and continues to own almost all of the retail developments. So after we build it, we will be the owner, and we've been a vigilant owner of all of our centers throughout the Sacramento region. And we will, the intent is to parcelize each one, but we don't intend to sell the parcels. Even the Circle K parcel will be a lease to Circle K, and we will manage the remainder of the center. That's the intent. With regards to the access point between the residential and commercial, we have regular, management and oversight of our properties, but as far as a security camera, unless the sheriff department has folks that monitor those, there would really be no one to look at the camera on a 24-hour basis. The thought I had while this discussion was going on is once we install that, if there are issues and it rises to a level where the Sheriff's Department and the County Planning Department and us as the property owners look at it and say that entrance is more of a nuisance than a value, then we collectively would have the opportunity, if the commission so chose, to close that entrance off if it provided more burden than benefit to the community.
Do you, I don't know of too many centers these days that don't have some sort of private security patrol that swings through. Would you expect this center to have some sort of regular private security patrol?
We do. We have security that comes through. We don't have on-site security 24 hours a day. This is a relatively very small center that we're talking about here, but we do have security, and we do have property management that's very responsive to tenant and neighbor comments and complaints and concerns. And we're in regular communication, obviously, with law enforcement when there's issues on any of our retail or office centers.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, Commissioner Devlin, Commissioner Conklin?
Would you maybe be amenable to maybe some sort of condition that if it is deemed to be problematic, or if there are challenges on site that are deemed to be problematic, maybe by the sheriff's office at a future date, that you would add maybe like some sort of on-site security during those particular problematic hours, midnight to 4 a.m.?
I just don't know if you would have someone there just planted at that gate entry, or what the intent of that would be as far as having someone on site during the middle of the night to monitor that. There's issues there. There'd be issues, in the surrounding area as well. I don't know how that would realistically play itself out.
Well, I don't know how closing off the access is the solution. I mean, I think if there's problems on site, I think the solution is to address the problems.
Certainly, if there's problems within the center, absolutely. We have security, and as I stated, we have a relationship with the Sheriff's Department. If there's problems or issues on site, we work with law enforcement to cure those issues.
Does the Sheriff's Office have any additional ability to require future security requirements for not just this site, but any site becomes problematic? Or is that only going to be tied to like one's alcohol license?
You're asking if the Sheriff's Department can require a business to enhance their security
to address nuisance
efforts. I'm not aware of the Sheriff's Department. It is more of a code enforcement kind of thing. So, I mean, the short answer is no. I don't see the Sheriff's Department undertaking some kind of enforcement action against a business.
Commissioner Devlin, I should note that this property is part of the Carmichael P-bid as well. We pay a significant assessment as part of that P-bid, and the P-bid is sort of a macro manager of the corridor, and they also are in direct coordination on the entirety of the area. They're making sure if there's transients, there's issues, there's vandalisms, that there's a very prompt response from law enforcement as well as people within the P-bid management team that are out there to address the issue.
Great. That actually, I think, solves a lot of what I was maybe looking
Yeah,
for.
I should have mentioned that from
And,
the beginning.
Maybe just a simple way of like making it known to the residents, whether it be through some signage, that if there are issues, maybe they can contact, the PBID's response team to kind of come out and address whatever vandalism or something else. Thank you.
We're very amenable to that.
Well, while you're up here, P4 and P6, the non-drive-through retail spaces, do you have an idea of what that typical tenant would look like in there?
We're potentially hair salons or others, but we're also looking at professional users that would serve the community. As was mentioned, originally we had drive-throughs. With COVID everybody wants a drive-through, the pharmacies, the restaurants, everyone. And so we're working with Supervisor Desmond's office. We winnowed that back so that P4 and P6 did not have a drive-through component. And we're looking at a variety of uses, but it could be professional users as well, chiropractors, medical, dental. We're trying to cast a wide blanket that will serve the community out there.
So something I could walk to if I lived in the neighborhood next door?
I would hope so, yes.
Hopefully. Not a Burger King just without a drive-through.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant team?
I do just one quick question, sir, and thank you. I know in the presentation you've already mentioned that any existing issues as far as like code enforcement and violations and anything that's loitering. I drove over to the site over the weekend, visited the Dutch Brothers right across the street. I did not see, perhaps a large number of encampments, but, the county would be responsible to the detention basin. Are we just kind of anticipating if there's any, potential encampments there, are they just going to move to the detention basin, or are we just hoping that perhaps by design of, having a construction site there that may not be an issue moving forward?
We've worked with the county on this issue on designing the detention basin and the fencing and having eyes on the basin and doing the landscaping around that basin, making sure it doesn't actually provide coverage or an area where people could go and there wasn't not an awareness that camps were being set up there. So that's our intent, again, to work with sheriff's enforcement, and obviously the homeowners there have a vested interest in making sure that that's the case. With regards to I would like to address the issue of the violations that were referenced. The first awareness we had of the two outstanding ones were when the staff report came out. I'm not sure of that. I talked to our property manager. She hadn't received any notices, but I want to assure you we're going to rectify those right away. When we bought this property 5 years ago, it was weed strewn, and there were a number of encampments on the property. We've been diligent. We were working to clean that up and keep it clean with the PBID as well as our private security team and our property management teams.
Understood. So no plans of putting a bowling alley again? Just kidding.
No time soon.
Thank you. I saw a little communication between you and staff, possibly on the interior setback. Do we have a suggestion for that or a number that we're comfortable with?
You have an agreement from us to look at that with our home building partner before we go to the Board of Supervisors. I think it's a reasonable request. We just want to make sure it's one that they can work with. So we're absolutely going to look at that between now and when we go to the Board of Supervisors as far as an agreement, condition rather, that we can agree to.
And just to clarify, Commissioner Braithel, excuse me, what I heard you articulate, and I'm looking for your head nod one way or the other, was a maximum of 50% of the lots would be allowed to deviate for the interior side yard?
On one side?
On one side, okay.
Yeah, I would say that's fair, being that I think a lot of times we see a lower percentage of those lots, and if not, they can come back with home plans. I'm trying to keep them from coming back for a special development permit, so I'm trying to find some path forward that protects us, because we're not going to see the project again. If it was coming back for a design review, I'd say, forget it, we'll handle it then. But since we're not going to see the project again, I'd like to see something that says that this would be the intent. So we have not just 100% of the lots 6 feet apart.
Understood. Thanks for the clarification.
Perfect. Final call, questions for the applicant? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Rathel, so is that a condition or more of a?
It's our choice at this point. If we want to leave them to work it out, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can either leave them to work it out or we can impose the condition.
You can recommend the condition.
We can recommend the condition. So yeah, I think at this point I would be in favor of recommending the condition, and then if it needs to change between now and the board, then they can justify it to the board.
Understood.
Do you want me to figure out where to put it in the conditions, or have you guys already done this work for us?
We have not done the work, but we can figure out where it goes in the conditions.
Okay.
That's why I asked the clarifying question, so that I have that understanding of the expectation of the commissioners as we move forward with the applicant team to work on the language specifically.
Thank you. So you're saying we're not going to come up with a condition tonight. We're going to recommend that it be included before the board.
That is correct.
Okay. That works for me. Anyone want to summarize? Anybody want to go out and make an amendment or any changes?
Yeah, no, I, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, that I felt that this project was a benefit to the community. It was consistent with our general plan and community plan, our policies, and would move staff's recommendation.
With a recommendation.
With a recommendation to the board to include that condition or
I'm
not?
actually in favor of greater flexibility for the applicant, but
Okay.
you know, that's not my motion. That's
So you have a motion for staff recommendation?
correct.
Okay. Do we have a second for a motion for staff recommendation? All right, we'll let that motion fail for lack of a second. I'll move staff recommendation with the addition or the recommendation to include a condition that the minimum interior yard setback be only used for 50% of the properties on one side at a maximum.
Second.
Any further deliberation?
Now, the residential portion, I just want to recognize that, I think affordability by design is kind of what this project says to me, and I'm glad it's moving forward. I know projects like this are not always easy, so thank you to the applicant for probably what has been a very long road. With that, I'm happy to support it.
Excellent. Please call the roll.
Commissioners Borja,
Yes.
Conklin,
Yes.
Devlin, and Raythel.
Yes.
And the motion carries for staff recommendation along with a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for deviation in the interior side yard setback. Did I
Thank
get
you.
that right? Okay. Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you all. Thank you. All right, please call item number 3.
Number 3 this evening is PLNP 2021-00127. It's the infill program update, and it's countywide, and the environmental document is a notice of exemption.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm David Olweros, Associate Planner, the planner assigned to the infill program update, which in short is a game plan to facilitating more infill development within the county. So some background for context. In 2008, a infill program and principles document was adopted by the board to identify barriers to infill development. That same year, the Great Recession took hold, severely impacting the county budget and leading to the elimination of the infill coordinator position. In November of 2011, the county's 2030 general plan update was adopted, which rather than a full overhaul, was a focused update oriented towards growth management. A key policy coming out of this updated general plan was policy LU3, which states that it is the intent of the county to focus investment of public resources on revitalization efforts within existing communities, especially within commercial corridors, while also allowing planning and development to occur within strategic new growth areas. The infill program is one of the growth management strategies. With the end of the recession and increased development nationwide and the lack of a significant level of infill development occurring within the county, planning applied for and was granted a local early action planning or LEAP grant in 2021 for the purpose of identifying current barriers to infill and developing a strategy to addressing them. Concurrently, but as a separate effort from the infill program update, in 2022, the board and county CEO retained a consultant to provide a general assessment of the development review process and identify recommendations for improvements, which resulted in the document titled the Sacramento County Development Review Process Assessment and Recommendations Report, or more commonly known as the Carriage Report. It resulted in the board's adoption of a resolution affirming board direction to staff regarding improvements to the county's development review process, noting the need to facilitate equitable investment and economic development in existing communities, especially within our existing commercial corridors and environmental justice communities. On April 10th, 2024, the board hosted a workshop to discuss in greater detail the potential process improvements, county code amendments, and financial remedies that could be pursued to incentivize and accelerate housing at all income levels and spur additional economic investment within existing communities and commercial corridors. A resolution affirming that direction was subsequently adopted by the board on June 4th, 2024. The 2008 infill program identified 5 next steps, including identifying targeted priority projects, designating 3 infill corridors, designating the 3 infill corridors as pilot areas, recommending infill incentives, and approving and implementing new policies. Of the 5 steps, only step 3 was implemented with the adoption of the Old Florentown Special Planning Area and Fair Oaks Boulevard Corridor Plan in 2011, as well as the North Watt Avenue Corridor Plan in 2012. However, additional efforts to ensure the success of the plans did not occur due to the budgetary impacts from the Great Recession on the county's general fund and the resultant reallocation of staff resources. So that brings us to the proposed infill program update. The update identifies 7 barriers to infill development and provides an implementation plan containing 13 actions which respond to the identified barriers. It also provides a summary of financial resources for infill housing developers, as well as an analysis of infrastructure funding options for infill development for the county's use. As mentioned, a primary component of the overall program is the implementation program. This program identifies 13 actions with the responsible county department and timeline for completion identified. While these actions are a starting point, the thought is that as time goes on and the infill program matures, additional implementation measures will be developed by the infill coordinator. The infill coordinator will really be the champion of the program and will be tasked with further vetting the definition of infill development, evaluating performance metrics such as timing and cost, and identifying appropriate future implementation actions. It is important to note that there is much carryover between the implementation actions proposed and recent board direction received during the development review process assessment and the board workshop on housing and infill development. With these other efforts, the board has already provided direction on all but 2 of the implementation actions of the infill program. To further the establishing mixed-use zoning districts and objective standards action, draft objective mixed-use design standards have been developed. While these are still in early draft form, staff is requesting direction for the initiation of zoning code amendments to refine these standards. If initiated, staff would continue to vet the provided draft and come back with a final draft for the Commission's formal recommendation at a later date. Again, the implementation actions are a general roadmap and not exhaustive. The program is intended to evolve and respond to new and different issues, such as legislation, the climate, the economy, and the needs of the communities. The infill coordinator will be tasked with keeping a pulse on the needs of the county and residents and following course with updated actions as appropriate. As a key component of the program update efforts, a targeted outreach strategy was developed, starting with the creation of a project website to push out information and solicit citizen engagement. Primary outreach strategies included pop-ups at multiple community events, including the Carmichael Farmers Market, the Vineyard Spring Cleaning Community Yard Sale, North Highlands Spring Extravaganza and Easter Egg Hunt, and the Sacramento Earth Day Festival. In addition to the pop-ups, an online community workshop was held via Zoom, which included an infill questions and answer session and breakout rooms for discussion to solicit feedback on important criteria for infill development for the community and preferred development types. Also included in the outreach was a series of 5 stakeholder meetings, which included meetings with affordable housing developers, market rate housing developers, business groups, local community-based organizations, and various county agencies. These efforts have guided the development of the proposed infill program. A draft version of the updated program was included in the materials for the board's workshop on housing and infill development held on April 10th, at which public response was generally positive. Nick Avdis, Wind Communities, ECOS, Baker Williams Engineering, and the North State BIA all expressed support. Sacramento 350 expressed support in concept, but also expressed the concern that greenfield continues to occur, as also mentioned in the comments received today. From an environmental review perspective, the project qualifies to be exempt from additional environmental review pursuant to the feasibility and planning studies exemption and common sense exemption. So in summary, the 2008 global recession had a significant impact on the success of the 2008 infill program, resulting in the amount of infill development desired not being seen. The board has expressed its desire for development review process improvements and for county staff to pursue policy and procedural changes to incentivize and accelerate housing and spur economic investment within the county's existing communities, especially in its commercial corridors. The updated infill program is the roadmap to facilitating the policy and procedural changes and development review process improvements necessary to encouraging infill development and increasing the housing production and economic investment desired by the board. It identifies current barriers to infill development, includes an implementation plan to respond to identified barriers, provides a summary of financial resources for infill housing development, and provides an analysis of infrastructure funding options. In furtherance of the implementation program, draft objective design standards for mixed-use development have been prepared, which in order to further vet, require action to initiate a zoning ordinance amendment to bring forth refined objective design standards for mixed-use development for the board's consideration and adoption. So with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend that the Board of Supervisors recognize the exempt status of the request under sections 15162 and 15061B3 of CEQA and adopt the infill program update and direct staff to initiate the identified implementation actions as contained in the draft resolution. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Warha, want to kick us off?
Just again, thank you, David, and thank you for the staff for meeting with me and about the infill plan last week. Really appreciate the in-depth sharing of the resources. I'm just going to repeat what I shared with the staff. What I'd really like to envision with the plan is, while it might not be a one-stop shop comprehensive of all resources, but we have different infill programs with mapping and incentives tied in from different agencies and organizations. So SACOG has the Green Means Go, SHRA has like their infill areas, there's corridor planning, there's maps, there's green zones, there's opportunity zones. And I was just hopeful for the staff that if possible, the infill coordinator can really try to like triangulate all of these. I mean, SMUD even has their low income designation zones Sac Sewer has like all these credits for some zones that would qualify for infill. So again, just trying to put some sort of a mapping tool where a developer or when we identify the sites to say, hey, these are the highest, or these are the sites that would qualify for the most number of incentives, and then it would actually hit X, Y, and Z from like the SACOG MPO planning standpoint, the SMUD standpoint, the SMACMED air quality management district standpoint, and then it matches like the SAC-RT corridor. So something to that extent, but I am very supportive of the staff, and I do think that the infill coordinator is a position that we've really needed for some time. I know that the team is already working hard in trying to recruit this, and I'm just very excited to offer my support and my services kind of moving forward with this position, because we do have a lot of moving pieces when it comes to infill development with new bills and legislation, and I think it'd be nice to just kind of work together to make sure that this it's not just one plan, but maybe an evolving toolkit for future developers looking to create infill projects.
Thank you, Commissioner. And to that point, that's something that we're currently really focused on with applying for grants. Green Means Go and North Watt, especially. North Watt's kind of our hot area right now. In coordinating those efforts, the Green Means Go corridor, it's our target of our infill. So that's something that we're doing, and coordinating grant applications. I know DOT has something in the works with North Watt, as well as we have the Sac Suburban Water District has a application for a grant in through us for some infrastructure in that corridor.
Just to add to that, Commissioner, I think we've sort of discussed this, but I see like the very next step of the infill coordinator, or possibly before even the infill coordinator is appointed, to define what infill is, and then define what quality infill is. And I think that goes to what you were relaying as far as things that would make quality infill, right? Triangulating all those different efforts. And I think that's something that the infill coordinator will be looking at.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devlin?
Thank you for the briefing. Great. Glad we're moving forward with this.
Perfect. Commissioner Conklin?
Yeah, thank you very much for the time last week, bringing me up to speed and summarizing the staff recommendations and kind of the various touch points in the public outreach, and also providing a timeline of kind of aspirationally what we're hoping to accomplish in our recruitment efforts. I just want to kind of go back a little bit more into the kind of collaborative stakeholder workshops. I was looking at the outreach. It looked like there were a lot of different creative ways of kind of communicating with the public and elsewhere. But specifically, I think the stakeholder outreach to North BIA and others, I'd like to see, ongoing. I'm sure there is. I know. There's we've got excellent staff here, and there's I think a great reputation of best practices kind of born out of Sacramento County. I think in many ways we lead many other counties throughout the state in this space, but it'd be great to see kind of a continuing touch points and collecting that ongoing input from collaboratively from stakeholders in the built environment, from those that are the end users of these spaces. Love to see kind of best practices, and I'm not necessarily advocating permit simplicity, but I know that from the built environment, a lot of times they have what they see again from other jurisdictions and what they'd hope to see in others, and I'd like to see if we can work with them to maybe bridge certain informational gaps or gaps that through a continuation of ongoing dialogues with them. That'd be my only.
Exactly, and this was just the beginning. I think as we roll into our implementation actions, we'll continue engagement with those groups.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I'll also echo the thanks to staff for the meeting, and then I'll proceed to dive into some details as I tend to. Are we recommending these mixed-use design standards as they are right now, or are these still kind of in progress?
No, so we would just be initiating. These are kind of almost like best management practices, if you will, at this point, and they would be further refined if the zoning code amendment was initiated. So this is something we put together as part of the infill program. We had some budget to do it, and wanted to get something in front of you guys as an example of what could be that would be further vetted.
Perfect. So we don't need to stress the details in there too much at this point. We can talk offline on those things.
Correct.
And, cool. Sounds good. It's a great start. I love the having those objective standards out there. I think it would go a long way for clarity, and I love the I'm not going to say generality of it, right? But the flexibility that is involved in a lot of them. It's like, hey, this is what we want to see, but as long as you stay within this guidepost and this guidepost, you have some flexibility between it. So I think it's a great start. On the flexible development standards that's in the infill report, it talks a little bit about my favorite land use policy 5. And it does talk about the program update recommends that the county consider increasing the minimum residential standard for infill areas to further encourage infill housing development. Can you put that in some other English maybe for me to understand? Is that saying that we would like to go from 75% minimum to a higher minimum for infill?
It might, right? I think that it could be more than 75% of the zoned maximum or some other iteration of that. Okay.
So now would be the time where I would go on record and say that would be I would not be in favor of further tightening it, because right now we say 75% to 150%, right, with density bonus law is our kind of range of where that is. So I think going from 75% minimum to 85% minimum probably doesn't get us very much, and it may cost us on those housing projects that really can't provide that density at that zoning. So that would be just my feedback on that approach at this point. Has there been any thought on, I guess a lot of the barriers from a developer standpoint are how long is this going to take and how much is it going to cost me? And so I would love to, I think there was some comments made a few years ago about, putting up the shot clock behind the permit counter that says, your average time for a rezone is 3 months. And that may have been a little tongue in cheek, but I would love to see what the running average is of a rezone and what the running average is of a design review. And maybe if we could talk a little bit about, has this been considered? Is it something that we could at least provide historical data on, our 12-month running average or 24-month running average? I know so much of this is in the applicant's hands and out of you guys' hands, but I do think having that data really, really is helpful. And it would also allow us to see what our shot clock looks like from an infill project versus a greenfield project, and may probably indicate where we have opportunities to improve.
Right, and that's a huge effort of the development review process, or effort coming out of that, to be better at reporting and creating reports to get that information. I think for these purposes, we still need to define the exact parameters of what infill is, and that will be something that the infill coordinator does. But more to come on that.
Yeah, I'd love to see the infill coordinator have that as one of their tasks, because I think it would give us really, really good data. The other thing that I just saw that, was kind of outlined in the barriers, but I didn't really see an implementation measure that clearly addressed it, was land banking. A number of public entities have gotten into this space where they have a vision specifically for a corridor or an area. And they set aside some public funds, not to lose or invest, but to compile those properties and sell them back, often at a gain, in order to accomplish that vision. Is the county considering any land banking or fund designated for that at this time?
Not at this point that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if Joel or Todd has
I can speak
more.
to that just briefly, which is to reiterate what David said. Not at this point, but we are having conversations with the board about a number of financial incentives, excuse me, to really spur those investment types in certain corridors, primarily commercial corridors, where we have a number of small properties and a different aggregation of owners who some have different interests than others in terms of moving forward with certain development types. We're starting those conversations with the board. I don't know where they're going to land on, a land banking type of structure, but it's definitely an intriguing idea.
And then is there anything in these recommendations? I know, other jurisdictions have, and I think it's mentioned in here a little bit, is they've incorporated a land value tax instead of an assessed property tax, right? Which basically says, hey, your land, although it's assessed because it has no improvements on it as this, it actually has a much higher value because it's sitting in the midst of all of this other development, but instead you have 3 homeless encampments and overgrown weeds on your site that we're constantly having to issue warnings to somebody who lives out of state or whoever the owner is. Is there any implementation measure to look at that at this point?
This is the first time I've heard of something like that, and I think, no, we haven't considered that, but I'm writing it down.
Okay.
It's interesting.
It's somewhere buried in these 1,373 pages. I didn't come up with the idea myself, but it's in there. It may have been in the carriage report. I don't know exactly where or it may have been some other document I was looking at earlier today. But I do think it's an interesting idea, at least to consider. I'm not a fan of more taxes, but I'm also, if we can find incentives, if we look at specific properties where this does make sense, or if we have the data which shows we have 100 properties out there that are sitting there like that, then it may make sense. If the data shows, I just don't know what it looks like. If the data shows we have 2 properties that are sitting out there, then okay, well, let's not mess with somebody. So.
I think you may have seen that in the infrastructure financing report that was attached as an appendix.
Okay.
And the thought is that the infill coordinator would further vet that and identify the appropriate course of action.
Not to belabor this any more than we need to, but the infrastructure piece, we are, as a county, looking at enhanced improvement financing districts, EIFDs. We haven't taken it to the board for their direction on policy associated with entering into those, but to your point, those are how you focus the property taxes that are in corridors or whatever geography you form it in, and not raising property taxes, but having those taxes go to that area. So it's something that we're looking into right now. Again, awaiting board recommendation on that.
Sounds great. All right. Any other questions for staff this evening? I'll turn it over. Do we have any public comment this evening?
And we do not have any public comments.
All right. Go ahead and close public comment. And I'm happy to move staff recommendation.
Second.
Any further deliberation? All right. Please call the roll.
Commissioners Borja.
Yes.
Conklin.
Yes.
Devlin.
Aye.
And Rathel.
Yes.
Motion carries for staff recommendation.
Thank you, and thanks for the time to dive into the details. I appreciate it. I know there's an important hockey game going on right now, so hopefully still going on that we're getting out for.
Going on.
Planning Director's report.
Just a brief report tonight. I don't want to belabor it too much. There's a resolution in the prior item, number 3. It is attachment number 3. This was the resolution that the board adopted just earlier this month, where we came back in the context of the whole housing and infill workshop conversation. This resolution really outlines our next steps as it relates to not just the infill program that you heard tonight, but other county code amendments, zoning code amendments that really are aligned with the infill program as well as the development review process initiative that David spoke about. We'd be happy to provide more details to each of you individually if you're interested in hearing about some of those nuances. And as part of that effort, I'm going to point out the zoning code amendments and design guidelines amendments related to, providing greater flexibility while also ensuring a quality product. Just generally, we have to have a number of conversations with the folks who actually build these things. To your point, Commissioner Conklin, I think about further engagement and outreach, we're going to have those conversations with those parties because it doesn't do us any good as staff to come up with our ideas if they don't really work, right, in the real world. And so we have to figure out what that balance is, but that's going to be a deliberative process with robust engagement. So I want to highlight that and offer to meet with you individually when we get into the details of actually implementing what that resolution says we're going to do. And I think that's it for tonight. Oh, wait, no, it's not. Sorry. We are actively recruiting for the infill coordinator position.
Excellent.
So,
Any miscellaneous scheduling items?
not from me. I think we have just 2 items on the next agenda as of this morning. So, yeah.
Everyone here for the 8th? And everyone here for the 22nd? As they know now?
Thank you.
Perfect. Public comment?
And no public comments.
All right, we'll go ahead and adjourn, 7:34 p.m. Thank you, everyone.